is Lee Habib, and this is Our American Stories. And now it's time for our Bring Small Businesses Back series, brought to us by the Job Creators Network. And today, we're talking to Heidi Ganahl, founder and CEO of Camp Bow Wow, the largest pet care franchise center in North America. With about $90 million a year in business and more than 200 franchises in 40 states and Canada. Heidi, thanks for joining us. We interview a lot of job creators, and we like to start always at the beginning. Tell us about your childhood, where you were from, what the area was like, and a bit about your parents.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Southern California in Orange County, back when Irvine, California was just getting off and started. And my dad was a police officer there, and my mom worked for the rec center there, just in administration. And I have a brother who's 7 years younger, and at age 13, they moved us to Monument, Colorado, a little itty-bitty town by the Air Force Academy, with about 3,000 people. And I think I cried for about a year. I was pretty upset about that move.
Yep.
But it ended up being a great thing.
And what led to that move? What did your dad do? Obviously your dad was in law enforcement, but what precipitated that move? And then talk about your first, if you could, your first bout with somebody who either taught you something about this idea called business ownership, or what your first experience was that led you to the idea that you might want to be in business for yourself.
Well, the two actually tie together. My dad was always very entrepreneurial, and on the side, he'd be doing a lot of things. He always had like a sales job on the side or was promoting a product, and so he moved us to Colorado to take a job in advertising sales. And they just wanted to get us out of Southern California. I think my dad saw the writing on the wall with what was going on as a police officer and thought it would be better for us to live in a smaller town and in a more rural area. So we moved here, and my dad ended up doing advertising sales, but eventually started his own business and had a couple different businesses and really kind of lit the fire in me around entrepreneurship, I think.
Well, that's great. And that happens sometimes and sometimes not. You know, we've learned from some that, we learned from Mark Cuban that how he learned to get into business for himself is he wanted some money for sneakers, and his dad threw him a case of garbage bags and said, sell these door to door. And,
oh my gosh, I didn't know that. That's fantastic.
And that was it. And from then he caught the bug. He thought, my goodness, I can make my own way. So as a kid, we ask every single guest this because we do it for First Jobs Friday, which is a segment we do every Friday. What was your first job? What did you learn from it? And do you have your kids working as early as possible?
Well, my first job was in Monument working at the Dairy Queen, and I had to perfect the little twirl on the top of the cone.
Oh, that's tough.
It was tough, and they were pretty critical about it. So I got taught to take constructive criticism.
Yep.
But actually, I learned a lot about responsibility and showing up on time and keeping to your word, doing what you said you were going to do. And I moved up pretty quickly because of that. And that was honestly a little bit of a preview into my future working at a franchise and understanding just how the general operation worked. I think I started that job when I was 15, and I really enjoyed it because a lot of my friends worked there, but I also learned a lot about being responsible and doing what you needed to do to earn a living. Yeah,
we also point out that Gwen Stefani had her first bout of labor and her first gig at a Dairy Queen. So you're in legendary company.
I like
Heidi.
that company. I'll take it.
And by the way, for my money, the hamburger at Dairy Queen is just fantastic, and the Dairy Queen milkshake is just a joy. And so I just want to let you know,
awesome.
I'm a big-time dairy. As you'll learn, we love every kind of what they call junk food. In other places, we call joyful food here on Our American Stories. So
I love that. I love that.
Funny story from your first job. Worst experience, best experience. What did you learn about customer interaction in that first job?
The thing I remember the most was when the big buses would pull in off the highway because we were right off I-25, and just 40 people would come barreling in, hungry and grumpy, and there would be 3 high school kids having to make all this food and serve them, and it was usually a disaster. We usually did not do a good job of handling those big crowds, but you really had to learn to just be humble and apologize a lot and do your best and see if you couldn't work through it.
Yeah, and just push it out and get through it and wait for the next explosion to happen, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. And I remember one of our favorite stories was when the Greg Kinn Band, do you remember them?
Oh, sure.
they came in and they brought their whole tour bus in, and we were so starstruck. I don't even think we moved for 30 seconds. We just stood at the register oh, what do we do now?
They don't write them like that anymore, Greg Kindan.
Yeah,
No, don't get me on music trivia. We'll go toe to toe for an hour and we'll forget what we were talking about, Heidi. So let me ask you this: the education. We love to ask people what they studied, what connection it had to what they were doing, and where did you do most of your learning? Formal learning, or the school, as we like to call the school of hard knocks?
I think I did a lot of the school of hard knocks, but I grew up in a family where my parents didn't go to college. They had us very young at 18 and 20, but they encouraged us to do all we could in the education space and go as far as we possibly could. They really recognized the value of education. So I went to SMU for my first year in Dallas on a scholarship, and then was very homesick, so moved back to Colorado, graduated from CU Boulder, and then ended up getting my master's in healthcare administration from the University of Denver. But I'm always learning. I'm always taking classes and reading and listening to podcasts, and I love to learn new ideas and listening to TED Talks. That's just kind of how I roll.
Well, that's great. And that's I think everyone now knows that education is not static, that you've got to be a lifetime learner. And I think that what's about to happen in the education industry is explosive, and online learning is going to take us in directions and fix problems that we don't even know are fixable.
It goes from my husband being able to, he's not the handiest guy. He's amazing at a lot of things, but he's the first to get on YouTube to solve any problem known to mankind and teach himself that way. But then you read about the Khan Academy that's teaching kids calculus that live in Mongolia that would never be exposed to that because they can get online and take a course.
Yep. Hold that thought, Heidi, and when we come back, more from a small business owner, a job creator, an entrepreneur. That's what we do here in Our American Stories. And sometimes, yes, it includes the stories of those people who are out there creating jobs, those people trying to grow their businesses, grow their communities, and ultimately grow the economy. More with Heidi Ganahl after these messages. This is Lee Habib, and this is Our American Stories. This is Lee Habib, and this is Our American Stories. And we're joined again by Heidi Ganahl, founder and CEO of Camp Bow Wow, the largest pet care franchise in North America, with more than 200 franchisees in 40 states and Canada. So you get out of college and you settle in on pharmaceutical sales. How did that work out for you?
It was a great job, but I called it the golden handcuffs. It was kind of boring. You did a lot of sample delivery to the doctors and then a lot of catering of lunches, all to get 30 seconds in front of a doctor. So I learned to get my message across really quickly, but it didn't really fill up my soul. It wasn't what I loved doing, and I was married at the time to Brian, my first husband, who was also very entrepreneurial, and we were always thinking up these business ideas. And we had two big fluffy dogs that we couldn't find a place that was good enough to take them. And about that same time, one of the first doggy daycares opened up next to my dad's business, and we fell in love with that concept, so we wrote a business plan for it.
I want to talk about your first husband. Just take a detour here. Tell us the story of his tragic end of his life. It had to be a terrible time for you, Heidi, but share that with the audience if you could.
Yeah, Brian was fantastic. He was such a great guy, and he was just one of those people that lit up a room and had such a great soul and spirit to him. But we were together for about 4 years, married for a couple years, and for his 25th birthday, our family, my dad ran into an old family friend who was a United Airlines pilot, and he did air shows with an old 43 Stearman. He was super excited about it, invited my dad to come down to the airport for a ride, and suggested if any of us wanted to go, he'd take us as well. And my dad thought it would be a great thing for Brian to do, and we all agreed. We thought, oh my gosh, he loves doing extreme skiing and all this, very adventurous stuff. So we surprised him with the birthday gift to go up in the plane. And they did all the stunts and did a flyby over my folks. I wasn't there. I had another event going on, and the plane crashed into the ground, and both Cliff and Brian were killed instantly right in front of my folks.
Oh my goodness. And
it was terrible.
And so, we have in our notes, Heidi, that for a while you were just, and I can't imagine how you wouldn't be, but you were lost.
So lost.
So, yeah. And
I was a mess.
You were a mess, but there were these two dogs, Mick and Winnie.
That's right.
They prodded you along, and talk about that, and talk about next steps and you going into this next phase of your life.
Well, the next few years were a mess, and I made some bad decisions with the settlement money I got from the plane crash. I remarried and quickly divorced, but I got a wonderful daughter out of it, Tori, who brought me back to life along with my pups. And about 5 years after the crash, my little brother comes to me, and I'm back in pharmaceutical sales. I'm a single mom now, and he's like, come on, you have so much spirit in you and drive. Let's get the old business plan from Camp Bow Wow and see if we can't get it going. And I was like, really? I'm going to waste, I had $80,000 left from the settlement out of $1 million. And I was like, I don't know that that's the best idea to waste that money on a doggy daycare.
Right.
He's like, I don't want to hear it. We're going to do it. And so we did, and it just took off.
And talk about that first step, because I think that people listening, you just shared something that almost every person thinking about going into business worries about. And that is that so many businesses fail. And my goodness, I heard a statistic about the restaurant business that was overwhelming. Like 90% of them fail within 5 years. And I just go, oh my goodness, that's terrifying. And yet, where would we be without great restaurant entrepreneurs? And they do it and they survive. You started with $1 million. You were down to 83,000, and yet you had to have learned enough from some of those mistakes to carry you through with your first Camp Bow Wow, because that first one had to be the toughest, right, Heidi?
It was, and I think the lesson I learned from everything I went through before I opened it was, you only live once, and your life is very short, and you have to make the most of it. And you can't spend your life wondering what if. And so I took a big risk, and I did it. But the difference was I was so passionate about this idea, I just knew it would work. And that's what I tell people. When you have an idea that you're not afraid of, that you don't feel a lot of fear, of course you're going to feel some fear about starting a business, then just roll with it and keep pushing on doors and seeing if they open, and when they don't, move on to the next one. But if there's an idea that you're super passionate about and it just fills up your heart, then roll with it. You've got to at least try it.
Yep. And this was your first space was 2,500 square feet in an old Veterans of Foreign Wars building. It had a drive-up drop-off and a pickup for dogs, but you were the first pet care center in the country with a streaming video feed so people can watch their dogs. My goodness, I got to tell you, that makes, the little place, there's not a Camp Bow Wow in our little town, but the little place where we have our dogs, it makes my wife so comfortable to know she can watch our dogs.
Yeah, that was my brother's brainchild, and the funny thing, video streaming back in 2000 was it would take a picture every 60 seconds and post to the internet,
right.
And it would be this blur of fur, and you couldn't see any of the dogs, but people loved it, and now it's hi-fi video, high-definition streaming, 16 cameras in a camp. You can pull it up on your smartphone. It's very cool.
So now you have the first successful Camp Bow Wow. What leads you to this thing called franchising? And before we even talk about that, just so I can share with the folks who are listening to Our American Stories, franchising is a legal concept and a business concept. And about 1 in 5 businesses in America are franchises. And that's everything from hotels to auto care specialties to maid services, you name it. The industry is 20% of the GDP. But what led you to this space, Heidi?
Well, it wasn't intentional. I had opened my second location, and one of my customers worked for Mrs. Fields Cookies, and he was like, Heidi, I've done a little bit of research, and there is nobody franchising a kennel or a dog daycare. And back then, doggy daycare wasn't anything like it is now. And I thought, all right, I don't know anything about it, but we went to the International Franchise Association conference. I met some great people who agreed to mentor me. We went back to Colorado, put together the legal paperwork, put a sign up on each of the counters, and sold our first franchise within a couple weeks.
Amazing. And, it goes to something I think that's important. When you're analyzing your own skill sets, What you saw yourself at was more of that person with a vision, more of that person with the marketing skills. But if you would have not gone the franchise route and you would have tried to own and operate each place, you would have had to gotten into the muck and the mire of individual hires, operation and management of all kinds of employees. And people don't know this about a lot of corporate franchisors. They aren't the ones that own these businesses. It's the franchisees that own the decisions. They don't do the marketing, Heidi, but my goodness, they are responsible for the day-to-day business decisions, the hiring, the management. So in a way, this was actually the perfect business structure and legal formation for your particular talents.
It absolutely was. I tell people the franchise model was such a gift to me because I am so visionary and strategic, and I don't enjoy as much being in the day-to-day operations, and I didn't have a lot of capital to grow the brand. But I had a lot of people that wanted to open one of these businesses. Once I got open, they would call me constantly, how do I do this? How do I get one of these places open? This is my dream. I want to hang out with dogs all day and make a living at it. So the beauty of it is you get to help so many other people do what they love and start their own business and make a living doing what, makes them happy.
I think it's what makes franchising so powerful in the end, Heidi. Not enough people can do the marketing and the branding, but what they can do is run the organization, and they have skin in the game because they're putting up the capital and they want to return. They want a return on their investment, and you do too. And so it gets incentives lined up in really interesting places. I wanted to talk to you about the National Labor Relations Board, and that's called the NLRB. And they recently handed down what are being called joint employer rulings. Talk about what this means to a small business owner. And obviously, you're not the franchisee, you're the franchisor. But what does this mean to you, the franchisor, and what does it mean to all those individual owners of each Camp Bow Wow around this country? And there are 200 of them.
Well, I'm extremely worried about my franchisees, but also the franchise industry in general. I mean, you go from having very open-ended operational expertise on the franchisee side, so they get to run their businesses how they best see fit. And, we provide a template for the brand and kind of guide the overall messaging and strategy. But the day-to-day is on the franchisee. And if all of a sudden you've got a franchisor that's liable for all the day-to-day operations of the franchisee and the employment, hiring, and firing decisions, that makes it extremely hard to have the franchise model work the way it does, because the amount of royalties we collect are very, very small in the big picture. Not enough to hire a complete staff of HR folks to manage 3,500 people in the Camp Bow Wow system.
Right.
Whereas at corporate, we typically have, 50 to 60 people on staff.
Yep. And there you have it, folks. You're hearing it plain and simple. These businesses work on thin margins, and they can't afford the compliance costs and all the government regulations. Heidi, hold that thought. When we come back, more from a real-life job creator. This is Lee Habib. This is Our American Stories. This is Lee Habib, and this is Our American Stories. And now we return to our conversation with Heidi Ganahl, founder and CEO of Camp Bow Wow. What is the NLRB up to, do you think, Heidi, doing this? Why are they doing it? I mean, I can see, I'm a lawyer by training, and I can see that, well, my goodness, it's easier and more fun if you're a trial lawyer to sue the corporate parent than it is the individual store for the negligence of an individual owner. It's spreading the risk up to what I call a deeper pocket. But what else do you think might be the reasons? Because I'm banging up in my head going, these are contracts. You have an actual existing contract between the franchisor and the franchisee, and the NLRB with this ruling would basically be rewriting that contract, Heidi.
That's right. That's right. And you nailed it on the overall intent of it. So I think the trial lawyers are going to love this ruling. But the other thing that's going to happen is franchisors are not going to sell franchise units to the individual mom and pop folks out there. They're only going to work with the big operators that own like 100 Arby's or 100, McDonald's that can handle the capacity of legal work and financial background that's going on behind the scenes. And what I think is going on is I think that the unions are trying to get involved in the restaurant industry and unionize those units, because most of the restaurants in the United States are franchises, and that's the way they do it.
Yep, they get in that way. And by the way, who gets hurt the most in this, Heidi, is the franchising is the single greatest way for poor people, minorities, for women to run their own and own their own businesses. And now, because of a ruling like this, goodbye. If you're a big guy, you can survive because you can deal with the compliance, you can deal with fighting off the trial lawyers. But if you're a little guy, no one's going to want to take the risk. The franchisor particularly is not going to take the risk. So
yeah, it breaks my heart.
Yeah.
I love small business and entrepreneurship, and I believe that's the key to keeping the American dream alive, keeping the economy going. And you're realigning the incentives, and there isn't an incentive for franchisors to sell individual franchises. And the individual folks that buy franchises that have these opportunities to do what they love and make a living at it, the risk is too great then, the expense is too high, and the regulation is too great to make it work.
Yep. And tell us a bit about, before we go to our rapid fire, because we have some fun rapid fire questions for all of our guests, Heidi, and you're not allowed to think too much about them. You just sort of have to answer. But I know she's going, you'll love it. But Job Creators Network, you're a part of this organization. Tell us what it means for you, why you've joined it, and what you're trying to do.
Well, I'm trying to defend small business, and like I said, it hurts my heart that there's such an attack going on entrepreneurship and starting small business in America when small businesses employ most people in this country, and it also gives most people the opportunity to start a business, support their family, do what they love, and build wealth and a legacy for their own family over time. And so I've got to put my hand up and say I was blessed to live the American dream, and I was able to start a business doing something totally out of the box that I loved doing and make a living at it and help 200 other franchisees do the same thing. And it's being destroyed right now. So if I don't put my hand up and fight for it, who's going to? And I have 4 kids that I want to be able to have the same opportunities that I did. So I just feel very passionate about fighting for that American dream.
And Heidi, one of the things we've been doing here on Our American Stories is, the average American listening to this, and we do stories about everything, and we're going to be doing Frank Sinatra's life for an hour after we're done here. And
awesome.
It's a beautiful story about a man who grows up in Hoboken, New Jersey, looks across that river and sees New York City as some far-off place. And yet he ends up singing New York, New York, and singing it in such an affirmative way that he says, I'm not just that kid from Hoboken. I'm that kid from New York, and I made it there, and I can make it anywhere. And it's such an aspirational notion, what that song is comprised of. It's just spectacular, and it's beautiful, and it's everything that's great about America. We talk about Dodd-Frank, and we've talked about it quite a bit, but how it impacts small bankers. We've been interviewing small bankers, many of whom, Heidi, will not give their last names and don't want to go on air because they're afraid of their regulators. And what they've told us again and again is the small community bank is getting killed. It can't afford the compliance costs. And because it's getting killed, the very people who are best at loaning money to small businesses, the very people who might get their first Camp Bow Wow franchise, are also being hurt. Talk about how access to credit has really been affected by Dodd-Frank and on small business owners in particular, Heidi.
Well, we've seen since Dodd-Frank came into play, it's just incredibly difficult for our franchisees to get financing now. And before, it wasn't easy, but it was, a lot more feasible. And it's very, very discouraging because there are so many passionate people that just need a little help, a little push financially, and they can make it happen and build an incredible business off of one of our franchises and, take care of a lot of doggies and a lot of employees, create a lot of jobs. And so it's so disheartening that they're trying so hard to protect people, but people don't want to be protected. They're willing to take risks in order to create jobs and to create wealth for their family. And if the good old government would get out of the way, we would have a lot more of that going on.
Yeah, it's so true. Let's talk about some of the things we ask all of our guests. A teacher that stands out in your mind, Heidi.
Oh, goodness. There were so many, but I think a professor at college, Professor Limberopoulos, he was a finance teacher, and I've never been a big numbers person. I mean, I can certainly read financial reports and get by, but he helped me kind of fall in love with the numbers and understand how important data analysis was to running a business or doing anything in life. And I think that's become a big part of who I am, which is counterintuitive to how I thought my marketing, branding brain was going to work. But it's all about metrics now and data and making decisions around data.
Tell us about a hobby or a passion or a quirk of Heidi Ganahl's that no one would typically associate with you.
That's a good one. Let's see. Gosh, that's hard. I grew up loving soccer and playing soccer, and that's how I got my scholarship to SMU. Was our family brought AYSO to Colorado, so the first soccer team when we were kids, and built it into a big program here.
That's great. Mentor, a particular mentor in your life who's meant the world to you.
Well, I have to say I've gotten to know Carly Fiorina pretty well, and I worked on her campaign as the lead in Colorado, and she is just an incredible person and just inspired me to be able to do whatever I wanted to do, like my parents did a long time ago, but in a different context. I think she's fantastic.
You know, Heidi, I saw her give a talk at a private function. It wasn't a deep political talk. It was much more about family and marriage in particular. She was talking about the importance of marriage to a group of mostly Christian folks, but people who are really concerned about marriage. And I was listening to her talk about being a secretary at HP and who came up beside her and who helped her and how she remembered those people, and then all the people who were always rooting against her. And I was watching particularly the waiting staff. I always like watching, ordinary folks, not the executives who are listening to her story, but ordinary folks, kids, young people in their 20s, bartending and putting themselves through night school. And they were riveted, Heidi, riveted by her story. And they were African Americans, they were Hispanic, and it was just beautiful watching her story truly inspire that staff.
That's how she is. When you're around her, you feel inspired and you feel like you've got so much potential inside, and she just wants to take a key and unlock it. And that's, I think, what her passion was about running for office and trying to kind of get America back to that.
Your favorite breed of dog?
Labrador Retriever, who's sitting at my feet right now.
There you go. And cat, your favorite cat?
I love Siamese cats. I grew up on That Darn Cat, that movie. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, yeah. Who are easier to deal with as customers, cat people or dog people?
Oh, Lordy, that's a tough one. I'm going to have to say cat people because they're a little bit more particular. Not that dog folks aren't, but when it comes to the specific care of their animals, I think. The
Stones or the Beatles?
The Beatles.
There you go. And last but not least, Heidi, the worst date you ever had?
Oh, my goodness. Probably it would have to go to a guy that I really liked, and we went out on a couple dates, and I found out he did not like dogs, and that was the end of it.
Oh, that's the end. That's the end. Oops. And it's good to not tell him ahead of time that you love dogs, too, because it's always good to find out the truth, because on dates, people will say anything to keep the date going. So that's
Boy, that's the truth.
That's the truth. Well, Heidi, thanks so much for taking the time with us. Thanks for sharing your story and even some of these quirky things as well. It was great having you on the show, and we look forward to talking to you in the future.
Thanks, Lee. Have a great day.
You bet. Thank you, Heidi. And this is Our American Stories. More after these messages. This is Lee Habib, and this is Our American Stories. If you're looking for news, well, you got the wrong station. And if you're looking for hot talk or some screaming and yelling, wrong again. We do stories and only stories here, stuff you can use, stuff you care about, the arts, entertainment, health, the law, and housing, the stuff that affects your lives and organized in that way. And we love to highlight the topics that get left by the wayside when so much of our media treats politics as the first and only concern of most Americans. And again, one of the most important topics in our lives is housing. How accessible it is, how affordable it is, how stable it is. Today we're joined by Cassandra Bajak and Austin Berg to take a deeper and an all too personal look at how property taxes are pressuring Americans to leave their homes. I know this. I wrote a piece in the National Review about how my own dad, who had paid $32,000 for a home in 1961, could have never imagined that his property tax bill would be $15,000 for 1 year. And that was 40 years later. And Cassandra is a homeowner from a suburb of Chicago. Austin is from the Illinois Policy Institute, the state's premier think tank. Cassandra and Austin, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Lee. Happy to.
You bet. Let's start with you, Cassandra. Let's start with just your story. And Austin, you'll come in on the policy level in a bit, if you don't mind. You and your family, Cassandra, live in Crystal Lake, Illinois, where the slogan is "A good place to live." Set the scene for us, if you could.
Well, it is a great place to live, and when my husband and I decided to move here from Elgin 13 years ago, we did look for a better community, better schools, good neighborhood, and nice little downtown area, and we built our house 13 years ago. Unfortunately, we didn't expect our taxes to double. We knew there would be an increase because of the better amenities and, local city and, suburb schools and everything like that. We love that. But unfortunately, our taxes have doubled and are pretty prohibitive at this point.
And your husband was an Army vet. You have 2 kids, and you work in, of all things, the mortgage industry. But what you discovered is, at a certain point in time, from the day you became a homeowner to today, the property tax bill ultimately started to catch up with the mortgage bill. Talk about that.
Well, it not only caught up, it exceeded it, and we're seeing that happen all over Cook County, McHenry County, Lake County, everywhere in the suburbs of Chicago, including the city. But usually the tax base, when we do new construction or, evaluate taxes, is about 2%. We're well above that, and Austin can give you the details on that, but we're at least double that factor since the values haven't really changed. The taxes have doubled, and we're trying to figure out what's increased, what's gotten better for us. And it's status quo, basically, but it just we haven't seen a phenomenal improvement or anything from what we came here from 13 years ago.
You bet. And Austin, just about my dad, he bought the house in 1961, and his personal property taxes at the time were a little over $200. And that skyrocketed to almost $15,000, and he had paid the house off decades before. And so here's a case where the property taxes were many, many times fold over his highest mortgage payment. Where does this money go, Austin? What's happening with property taxes? Give us a look from top and the policy level in Illinois, but this is New Jersey. This is a lot of states, isn't it, Austin?
Yeah, that's the sad part about stories like Cassandra's, is that they're increasingly becoming the norm in Illinois. So Illinois is one of the highest property taxing states in the country, and we come in about number 2 or number 3 every year. And after Chicago phases in its record-setting property tax increase over the next couple of years, we're the odds-on favorite to take the top spot. So what does that mean in practice? Well, the average property tax bills, take McHenry County, where Cassandra lives. That comes out to $800 a month, average. So can you imagine just being, a real estate agent in a middle-class area trying to sell that tax liability to new people coming into your neighborhood? I mean, these are good schools. They're pretty good schools, but you could pay for a top-tier private school pretty much anywhere else in the country with the type of money people are spending here on property taxes.
Yep.
So this is why you're seeing, record-breaking out-migration from Illinois over the past few years, because who would want to stick around and pay that bill? It's just fundamentally unfair.
Yep. And Austin, do people ask the question now? I would think that they're getting increasingly wise. They must want to ask the question, where were taxes 4 years ago? Where are they now? Because then they can actually do a little graph. 800 today, maybe 1,600 8 years from now. And by the way, when I retire and I've paid this thing off, wow, keep putting that line up, and maybe I've just paid off a home I can't afford anymore.
Yeah. I mean, you're basically paying a mortgage you can never pay off, and you're renting your home from the government, and the government is not a very good landlord. So you see, since 1990, you see in Illinois, you see property tax revenues have gone up 3.5 times the median household income. So people are just getting squeezed left and right, 3.5 times the median household income. Incomes have been stagnant, housing values have been stagnant or declined, and property taxes get higher and higher and higher every year.
Amazing. Cassandra, now we've heard your dilemma. What are you doing? I mean, are you considering a move? What are you going to do?
Well, we really have to, unfortunately. Now, my children were born and raised in this house. We wanted to stay in Crystal Lake forever. You know, it's a good location for our jobs and everything like that. And we've appealed several times and to really no good results as far as that's concerned. They ended up changing the factors on us where our property value now seems accurate, but the factors have gone up. So we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. So downsizing either here in Illinois to keep our children in school with their friends, or moving out of state, which is a very possible option for us as well. We're really in a crunch right now where we're trying to decide that for our family.
Well, and it's interesting, and Austin, wondering if you could weigh in here. One of the things we love to cover here on this show is where are people moving from and where are they moving to? And we just follow the annual Atlas Van Line survey, which I think is the most fascinating policy look at this space than almost any think tank could provide, because, well, generally many folks might not care about, public policy the way we put it out at think tanks. But man, Atlas Van Lines doesn't have a dog in the fight. It's just sort of an interesting tidbit. Talk about where people are moving from and to and why.
Sure. So you can look at moving company studies, you can look at IRS data, you can look at census data. All of those studies point to Illinois residents leaving for Texas, leaving for Florida, leaving for Arizona, leaving for Indiana, just lower tax states where you can get a lot more house for your money. And when you look at the survey data, the two number one reasons for moving, long distance moves, this is according to census data, this is common sense stuff, but it's economic reasons, so jobs, and number two is housing. So if you're in a state like Illinois where the jobs climate is among the worst in the nation, the property taxes are among the highest in the nation, wages are stagnant, why wouldn't you move to a booming state where taxes are reasonable? You're not seeing out of control pension and health care costs for government workers. You're not seeing crazy workers' compensation costs that are hitting cash-strapped local governments.
Yep.
You're not seeing these crazy prevailing wage requirements you see in Illinois. It's a no-brainer for a lot of families.
In Austin, what we're not considering, we did a segment on the Mercedes-Benz corporate offices in Montvale, New Jersey, moving to Sandy Springs, Georgia. And they said one of the big reasons was that the costs of housing were absorbed by them in payroll. So the businesses have to pay the cost if they want to keep their people put. And then they got to pass those costs along to somebody else. Talk about the impact of these higher taxes on businesses themselves, Austin.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been doing a lot of work on manufacturing across the state. And when you talk to manufacturers, I just talked to one in South Cook County, and he's moving his 500 jobs. It's called Hoist Lift Truck. They make forklifts. They'll be moving their business, which gives about 500 jobs, great, I think, average salary in the $60,000, $70,000 range, moving them just a matter of miles to Indiana. And when I was talking to their CEO, Marty Flaska, he was saying, I thought this would be a tough sell to my employees, but when I tell them what they're going to pay for housing versus what they're paying in Cook County, when I tell them what they're going to pay in, say, sales tax just for stuff for diapers, for food, for anything, for any type of service or good, they're going to get it cheaper. Their quality of life is going to skyrocket. My bottom line will be benefited by getting out of this tax structure. It's a win-win for everybody.
Well, it is. And what I'd love to do is follow up with you, Cassandra. If you do move, I want to find out where you've moved to. I want to find out what your life's like. We want to do one of those WPA-like long-form stories where we follow people around from where they've moved from and to, and let the American public know this is going on not just in your life, because I know so many people are feeling this. It's happening in Cassandra's life, and guys like Austin Berg at the Illinois Policy Institute, well, they're keeping track of it all. Thanks so much for both of you joining us today.
Thanks,
Lee.
You bet. This is Lee Habib. This is Our American Stories, and these are the kind of stories I know you care about. And by the way, folks, if your property taxes aren't out of control, get to those school board meetings. Petition your state legislature. When they say it's only a 1% or a 2% increase, say no. Say no, because 2% every year times 20 years, and the next thing you know, your state's Illinois too. This is Lee Habib. Again, this is Our American Stories. You can catch all of our material at ouramericannetwork.org.